Are you feeling a little lost or uninspired? Ready to add some serious sparkle to your life? Welcome to Coaching for Millennials, the podcast where we ditch the blah and say yes to your dreams. I'm your host, Jose Miguel Longo, a proud gay Hispanic husband, a dog dad, and a social justice warrior. For over a decade, I've been a career and life coach, helping folks like you uncover their passion and write their own career stories. Whether you're a Gen Xer, a Gen Y, or a Gen Z, this is your go-to guide for crafting a killer resume, finding your calling, and taking charge of your life. We'll dive deep and hold each other accountable and build a roadmap that leads you to a life that truly lights you up. So if you're ready to turn your fantasy into reality, tune in. It's time to unleash your passion because your purpose is waiting. This is Coaching for Millennials, and we're about to make some serious magic happen. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Coaching for Millennials. I am your host, Jose Miguel Longo, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Friends, it is another week, and as you know, there's always something new happening in the world, period, but also in content-wise here. So I'm really excited about today's episode because I mentioned last week how the Instagram algorithm is finally starting to work in my favor. Not that it wasn't working before, because I think it was working based on content that I was searching, but I must have done something recently in my search where it started to actually show me millennial related content. And for the purpose of not having to do a lot of deeping, or wow, that doesn't sound right, a lot of deep digging, and finding topics, themes, or content, or issues, or things that are really relevant to millennials, which obviously this podcast is about life and career. It should be in my feed, right? It should live in my feed all the time, but it hasn't. So I came across a video last week that was from a content creator by the name of Roxy Couse. The name is spelled Roxy Couse. And if it's not Couse and it's Cuse, I apologize. Or if it is Couse and I'm pronouncing it wrong, either way, I still apologize. So Roxy, if you're out there and you're watching this, shout out to you for the inspiration behind this episode. Today, we're really talking about how millennials are one of the hardest working generations out there. And her reel on Instagram really resonated with me because I think it's one of those things where until someone says it out loud, you play that over and over in your head. And I'd like to think that I say the things out loud that sometimes people are thinking but don't often say. And her feed has been giving me life, not just because I started following her, 2 weeks ago when she finally came up on my feed, but just because she is someone who really speaks her mind. Her brand is really focused on that career, that corporate humor, millennial culture, which is what we live for here on the podcast, but also just being authentic and really sharing the voice of what millennials can do to help them prepare for themselves in the workplace. And the other thing that inspired this episode was a recent Forbes career article. And I subscribe to Forbes career specifically because I've been subscribed for the better part of maybe 15 years or so now. I started subscribing when I first entered higher education just to be more aware of trends that were happening in the world of work and the workplace. But this article particularly starts with the title of "You got the promotion, then everything went downhill." And as I started to dig deeper into the article and the topics that they were discussing, it really hit home to me that millennials are one of the hardest working generations, but our work ethic is what makes us stand out amongst the rest of the generations. It's not just the fact that we get shit done. It's the fact that we're the most dedicated person on the team. It's the fact that we've been working since our very first job and we never punched out. It's the fact that we are able to multitask and know that with that, we can have fun while we're doing it. And it's the fact that we're able to take on extra tasks and never saying no without having the training to do what we need to get done. And it's also the fact that we've also felt the need that we have something to prove because our generation has been continuously diminished by the culture, by society, by other generations, and by the broken system that's kind of supposed to be lifting us up and building us up. And so, what we're going to unpack today is really talking about just because we've been working so hard and we're still getting burnt out doesn't mean that we can't create a shift for ourselves that really provides an opportunity that allows us to be heard and seen in the workplace, but done in a way that really represents our unique work ethic. So, before I jump into all those things, because like I said, this episode's loaded with a lot of really new content, a lot of amazing conversations, let's talk about what this episode's called. Millennials work harder than ever. So why are we still getting burned? So we'll jump into that here in just a second. And, I want to pivot a little bit into my segment that I like to call what I'm watching, what I'm liking, and what I'm reading or what to look out and what to look out for. And in particular, really was what I'm liking is Roxy Kaus. Like I said, I'll put in the show notes her Instagram handle and I'll give her a shout out. So thank you so much for your content. Excuse me. On the other side of that, what I'm watching and what I'm reading, well, I started watching a series called The Bear. And the reason I started watching this series, and I'm probably a little late to the party, if I'm being honest, is because my BFF and I, who are recording the podcast Heated Reverence, if you haven't heard it, you heard it here, we're actually moving into our second show of the season. And bear with me while I adjust my microphone here. Okay, there we go. Hopefully it stays. And I've never watched The Bear. I love to cook. I've worked in kitchens. I know enough about kitchens of how they can be really intense and all those things. But this is the show that she picked for us to do for our next show as part of our podcast. And so the verdict's still out. Let's just say that. I'm not going to say that I don't like it because that's not true. I'm not going to say that I love it because I don't know enough yet to say yes. I'm about 4 episodes in. I haven't finished the fourth episode, I don't think. And if I did, I need to go back and rewatch it. But the verdict's still out. All I can say is that it's going to be interesting when we start recording these podcast episodes to talk about The Bear, what I'm reading. So, as I mentioned before, our podcast, Heated Reverence, kicked off with Heated Rivalry. And with Heated Rivalry, we basically did the first 6 episodes of the season, so season 1 of the show. And now we're trying to encapsulate the book and, kind of a episode where we just talk about our thoughts and kind of closing out the season for the whole Heated Rivalry packaging. And I have to tell you, so I'm reading the book on audibles. Wow. On an Audible. Let's say that. I'm reading the book on an Audible. So I'm listening to it as an audiobook on Spotify. Now, I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. I've been listening to audiobooks for over 2 decades now. It was one of the first things that I subscribed to when Amazon released Audibles or Audible. The naming is fucked. I can't say it for shit. But as a person who has ADHD and is a lover of reading, as I've gotten older, I've struggled to stick with a book in my face. And maybe I could read this book because it's so damn good and I wouldn't have a challenge, staying focused. But what I've learned about myself is that even though I have this lovely collection of books and there's a lot more that you can't see in my office, in my little studio, is that I am a page turner. I like to feel it on paper. But there's something about my attention span and being able to listen to something and how I learn and process it that my modality of audio has got me hooked. The person who reads this book, I forget his name, but at first I thought I was going to be annoyed by his voice. And as more time went on, I was like, damn, I understand why this person is the person who's doing the voiceover. Just amazing. And shout out to him, whoever you are. If I remember their name, I'll put it in the show notes. But all I would say is that whether you've read the book or you haven't read the book, I recommend it. Do the Audible. Oh my god, the audiobook. I don't know why my mind wants to say audible. It's not that it's wrong, it just sounds weird. What to look out for? I have some momentum that I can share in regards to some of the packaging that I've been working on, particularly around the job search pieces of some tools and resources that I've been developing. I don't know if you recall a few weeks back, I had mentioned that I was going to create a toolkit that was going to be, in coordination of some free resources, but also some paid resources that I was going to be putting out in regards to kind of like the next step of the Unstuck and Focused guide, but more specifically focused on the job search piece and specifically focused on millennials who are in the career pivot era. And so there's been movement because my content is solid, meaning I've worked through the first draft and now I'm kind of revising some of the pieces to it to making sure that it speaks to how I want it to be written. And then I'll be working on packaging, which is like the marketing pieces. And I'm hoping that by the end of April, maybe the beginning of May, this is just me putting a timeline for myself, that I'll be able to go live with it. It's taken me a while because I've shifted from the storefront that I had, which was on Beacons AI. I loved it. I had it for 2 years, but I decided to shut it down because I wasn't seeing numbers in people actually using it or reaching it to connect with me. I was paying for a tool that I could have been saving myself money on for years. Granted, it wasn't super expensive, but some of the expenses when it comes to having a business and having a podcast can get pretty pricey. So I was being really mindful about my expenditures and I decided to, put a pin in that until I fully developed my website, which is also part of the reason why I have made like that little bit of a pivot. It was like, okay, I'm jumping off of this. I have to get a website done. I could only do so much with the landing page that really hasn't been serving me in the way that it should have, but it was a great place for people to find me and connect with me and, have content listed on there. Fast forward to the next couple of weeks, that website, cross my fingers, will hopefully go live and will be in a much better place for coaching for millennials. And then all of the other content that I've been creating will be live as well. So that's where we're at. So, be on the lookout. As I said before, you know where to find me on Instagram at Coaching for Millennials or at Jose Miguel Longo. The same is for LinkedIn if you want to connect with me on there, or if you want to shoot me an email, hello at coachingwithjosemiguel.com. Okay, let's go jump into the episode here because I feel like I've been talking at you for a hot minute now. So, this particular episode, as I mentioned before, has, I think it's reflective, right? I feel like I have seen this for myself. I don't know that I've talked about it out loud with other people other than, just some of my coworkers from past roles. But when you pivot from higher ed into the corporate world after you left the corporate world, but you weren't in the corporate world at the same time that, the millennial generation kind of evolved to where it is today, you forget about these things until they become very relevant to you. And by that, I mean, like, it's not to say that higher education doesn't have folks who work their asses off and don't see any recognition or feel like it's, they're falling flat on their face no matter how hard they work. That's not the truth because let me tell you, it's very real. We just don't talk about it the way we see in the corporate space. So the thing here is that I want to call out millennials were conditioned to believe that hard work equals success. Let's just start there. And most millennials were raised to believe that if you work hard and if you're loyal and you put in the time, it will all pay off. That's really what it comes to it, right? And to be fair, that used to be true, but the workplace changed. And an example of this is that you could be the most reliable person on your team, always available, always delivering, always saying yes. But if your work is not visible or tired or it has an impact, you get overlooked. That's just the reality. I can't tell you I can't tell you how many jobs that's happened to me in. I remember a job not that long ago maybe 2 years ago. I worked my ass off, and it didn't matter how hard and how much I said yes. I was showing up in the places that I wasn't supposed to be showing up. They weren't part of my job, nor was I getting paid for it. It just didn't matter. I wanted to be successful in my workplace, and I wanted to show up for the people who I was delivering for, which were my customers. But the people around me who made the decisions didn't give two shits. So this is not a work ethic problem. It's a strategy gap. And where I'm relying on effort, it really is more of positioning. Here's what I mean by that. When you're a person who shows up time and time again, you're basically sacrificing your time, your energy, your mental health, your personal life. And then you don't see that that sacrifice is being rewarded, but you see all the other people around you being rewarded. That's an example of how a system is really intended to only work for the people that are positioned in a certain way. And I think the point that Roxy makes is that, until you piss us off, right? I never got pissed. I never got pissed. I never got pissed because it became more about believing that it was going to happen to me and my time was going to come. And then it changed when it didn't come and I knew that it should have been me. And time went by and it still wasn't happening. And more people were getting promoted and more people were making more money than I was. I feel like I sacrificed a part of myself for a job and a place that never cared about me in the first place. So that, that time, that mental health, the energy, my personal life really was the sacrifice of it all. The strategy that I thought I was creating and building to build the reward never showed up. Now, let me give you other examples that are not just personal. Think about two employees. Let's just say, for context, person A and person B. Excuse me. Person A works 10 to 12 hours a day, takes on extra work, says yes to everything, while person B understands leadership priorities, communicates impact clearly, builds relationships with decision makers. Who do you think gets promoted? Most of the time, it's person B, not because they're better, but because they're strategic. I was not focused in any of my jobs in the leadership piece. I was focused on the delivery of the customer and who I was serving. I didn't go to work to serve leadership. I went to work to serve a customer and bringing those concerns and problems and issues to light while building on solutions. I work on solutions. I never come to the table empty handed without having a solution because that's just not how it works. I think the bigger thing here is that how can we shift our work ethic mindset while keeping the same work ethic strategy to reframe our understanding of how do we not just be that employee who, you know, let's work smarter, not harder, but also is able to clearly understand the level of impact that we're trying to make. It's not because, again, person B is better, it's because they were strategic. And so many of us as millennials, I mean, I don't want to say poor us, but fuck, we've just been fucked so badly. And this is something that I don't think that we're taught or have been taught. And if you know this because you've either learned from your mistakes and you've continued to develop this as a skill that you've constantly pivoted yourself to doing. But I think the bigger thing here is that we want to shift from worker to strategy. Let's just call it that. Shifting from being a worker to a strategist. Now, excuse me, I can tell you that I've certainly learned how to do this now, 4 years into the tech space. In higher education, I was always doing it, but it's such a different environment. So you also have to understand who you're serving, who leadership is in the environment. It takes time, right? It takes time. But when we reframe this, you're not just an employee, you're managing your career when you shift from being the worker to the strategist. Now, what does this all mean, right? Because we can play this game of words, but without having, the particulars and the details, this gets lost in the sauce. So, what this means is understanding how decisions are being made. This is also where I say bring your pen and paper. If you've been here before, you know that there's golden nuggets get sprinkled all throughout. And I'm always dropping a call to action at the end of every single episode where you should have your pen and paper. This is where you have that blank notebook that serves as your journal. Let's pick this back up. So, this means that understanding how decisions are made, understanding what leadership values, meaning the people you work for or the people that you work for, who they work for, the report to, understanding where your work fits into the bigger picture. Here's an example. I pivoted from education, higher education, into ed tech and HR tech. Now, that wasn't just a hard pivot, meaning like I had to reposition my whole framing of what I did on a day to day. I had to learn how to work from a remote work environment, even though I pivoted during the pandemic. I had to be strategic in how I was showing up to work to the people that I was supporting. I went from serving student to student to student and groups of students to serving institution and all of the people that belong to it. So I had to be really mindful and aware of that. And the thing is too is that our brains sometimes as we get older, and I say sometimes because if you continuously train your brain and you continuously are in that space of evolving, you should not face an issue with learning. But sometimes as we get older, it's harder to learn something new and it takes us longer to do so. I remember my first year into ed tech, I knew the product, but doing the job was hard. I was exhausted, but I worked just as hard to get myself to the same level everybody else was at. And then when I finally found myself in my going into my second year feeling leveled and feeling like I had a solid understanding of what I was supposed to do, then I shifted my mindset and positioned myself into into an space and into a space and strategy that I thought was going to allow me to grow to the next level that I wanted to be in that work. Now, the fact is that that never happened, no matter what I did. But what I can tell you is that if you pay attention to how you translate your skills into understanding how decisions are made, if you pay attention to what leadership values and putting that into positioning into how you do your work, and if you pay attention to understanding how the bigger picture moves and fits, then you can be strategic about the moves that you make. If you're focused on these things, you didn't just work harder, you now evolved your own value and your placement at your organization and where you work. So here's what I want to do in these next couple of minutes. I want to give you a mindset framing here. By now, you're probably saying to yourself, well, shit, if I didn't do this, then where does that leave me? I've been working my ass off for however many years or for however long. Here's the thing. You're not crazy. You're not lazy. You're definitely not behind. The system changed. If you're still operating with old rules, you'll feel like you're getting burned. But once you shift into a strategic way of doing work and a strategic way of how you show up, everything starts to change. I'm saying this because I leveled myself up in every job that I've had, whether I left that job voluntarily or I was laid off or I was fired or I decided that my contract wasn't renewed, whatever that looked like. I positioned myself to know that what I took from here, I could take it up higher in the next place I go. What I've learned from every job that I've had is a skill that I take with me. Now, how you apply that into the next role is up to you. So let's go back to what I said before. Skill translation, positioning, and strategic movement. If you start to adopt those to understanding how decisions are made, understanding what leadership values, and understanding where your work fits into the bigger picture, that will level you up in a way that you probably don't even know yet. Now, here's something that I want you to take with you as we kind of close this episode out. And this is, the call to action here. This is where where I always say, bring your pen and paper. After this episode, I want you to answer these three questions. What work am I doing that actually drives impact? Number two, who I who knows about the value that I bring? And then number three, what direction do I want my career to move to next or move in next? These were the things that I asked myself during my transition from my last job, going into my job search and going into how I was searching for jobs and the conversations that I was having with myself while researching those jobs. I think I mentioned before early on in the season how in my job search, I was shifting from being in a role that was specifically involved with customer success because I felt that it wasn't serving me in the way that I thought I should have been serving it. And what I learned along the way was a couple of things. First, that pivoting into a space that you have the work experience, but isn't really showing up in your resume the way that it should be, isn't going to serve you justice in this current economy and the current job market. Having to shift also into a environment of work that you haven't done in a while, even though your skill set may even present itself stronger now than it did before, isn't also going to serve you in this job market, in this economy. So the takeaway for me was like, well, what do I know? What have I been doing? And what am I doing that I should be doing differently to continue to drive impact? What is the value that I bring to the table? I had to write all this stuff out. I really got deep into getting clear on what I wanted my next move to be. I was hard set on pivoting out of customer education and still staying in tech, but moving into I was hard set on leaving customer success and moving into customer education or moving into HR in the tech space. But then I started to pay attention to how the job market wasn't working in that favor to really deliver on what I was looking for. And so it caused me to shift back after months of like trying this strategy out to really focus on what do I know? What have I been doing for the last 4 years? And what can I learn from the mistakes that I've made that ultimately got me to where I am and being reflective about it? But how can I apply these three questions? What work am I doing that actually drives impact? AI. That was my answer. How can I show up when I'm learning about AI? And the reason I say AI is because I really got clear in my skill development and saying, oh, I want to learn a new skill while I'm in this season of, quote unquote, unemployed. In between jobs, in between coaching clients, in between consulting, I obviously have clients. I obviously have projects and consulting gigs, but they're not always consistent. How can I level myself up? What can I do that drives impact? So learn a new skill. I shifted to AI because this is where the market is going. If I want to stay in tech, AI is a really huge piece of how businesses are working. And if you have that skill under your belt, you're going to be golden. Now, the second question was who knows about the value that I bring? Well, I have to share that. If I don't tell people, they're not going to know. Yeah, my friends may know who I talk to every single day, but if I'm not presenting it or showing up, then it's not going to be visible. So, how can I showcase that? Well, I redid my course that I teach twice a year in higher education, specifically to focus on AI. And the course is specifically around career development, but it's focused on career champions in higher education. And so I rebranded and redesigned this course layered with AI elements of how can it be used to help college students in this world of AI to explore ethical and equitable uses of AI tools and understanding how to use them as a collaborative tool, not as a tool to do your work for you. So I used that as one way of presenting it and did the research. And then really looking for the jobs in which I can showcase my knowledge and the skills that I'm learning in my certifications. I already have an AI certification in curriculum design and instruction, and that I got a year and a half ago. I just earned another certificate in human resource management with AI focus in talent management and compensation. And now I'm getting my certificate in AI from Google, which is like 8 or 9 modules, probably 6 courses in one. It's really intense, but I'm looking at what direction I want my career to move into. That's the third question. I really choose to be in this space because I feel that is where the future is going. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have strong feelings about AI, have strong feelings about what AI is doing. And I think it's more about how do you understand what AI is and really educate yourself on how it's supposed to be used and how you can use it to help improve yourself and those around you. Yes, when it's put in the wrong hands, it could be dangerous, but so is a lot of other things. And the reality is that it's not going away. We could see how AI is transforming the world of work. We can see how AI has already changed a lot of people's careers, meaning people have gotten laid off from their jobs because AI is taking over. So, what can you do to help prevent this from happening for yourself? You reskill, you reschool, you relearn, you level yourself up. Now, I know that this whole episode wasn't focused specifically or intended to focus on these elements where I brought in the AI conversation, but I use that as my real life example because I felt that it's important for people to understand and make the distinction that if you're a millennial, you're always going to be a hard worker. No one can take that away from you. And if you're a millennial, you know how to get shit done. If you're a millennial, you're always a dedicated employee. If you're a millennial, you know how to fucking multitask, and we're damn good at it. If you're a millennial, you will always say yes to things, and even though you're not getting paid for it, because you care you're going to do it. I want every person who's listening to this to know that you have the ability to get to where you want to be in your career, but you have to know how to be strategic in doing it. So if you're sitting there thinking, I've been working hard for years and I still feel stuck, that's exactly what I do to help millennials navigate their lives and their career. I give them career clarity, I give them a career strategy, and we work on making intentional moves instead of reactive ones. I hope this episode gave you enough understanding and concrete examples and good thought provoking questions to start making serious considerations of what you're going to do next to level yourself up in your career. If you're curious and you want to do a, career clarity session, reach out to me. You can connect with me at hello@coachingwithjosemiguel.com. Find me on Instagram at Coaching for Millennials or Coaching with Jose Miguel, or actually take that back, Coaching for Millennials or at Jose Miguel Longo. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, at Jose Miguel Longo. I hope that your week is going well. I hope that this episode leaves you with some inspiration and allows you to feel connected and heard and seen. And if you think there's someone out there that you think needs to hear this episode, please share it with them because that's how we grow and that's how we get this message across. Thanks so much for spending a moment of your day with me. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, amazing listener. If today's episode sparks some inspiration, don't keep it to yourself. Share the magic with your friends. And hey, if you're feeling the love, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to our show and leave us a review. Your words fuel, fire, and help this community grow. Want to hear more about a specific topic? Have a burning question? Swing by coachingformillennials.com for the latest blogs, newsletter, and all things coaching. We're building a world where dreams become reality, one episode at a time. Thanks for being part of it. Can't wait to catch you into the next episode. Until then, all my love, light and shine.